We now come to questions to the Prime Minister, and I start with Robert Logan.
Go on, sir.
Deputy Prime.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been asked to reply on behalf of my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister. As the House will know, he's been at the UN General Assembly in New York, where he's held meetings with world leaders, in particular leaders from countries vulnerable to climate change. He's also met with President Biden for discussions on climate, COVID and international security.
Robert Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. GPs have done a brilliant job delivering the vaccination programme. They've had to work very long hours in the most challenging circumstances, and now they're having to deal with a huge COVID backlog. As a result, many of my constituents have contacted me, frustrated by how difficult it is to see their GP face to face. Just this week, I've been contacted by someone who's been diagnosed with cancer after being taken into hospital. Now, she said to me, and I quote, "I can't help but wonder if they'd have caught it sooner if I'd been able to see someone in person instead of trying to describe my symptoms over the phone." So can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister what the government are doing to tackle the COVID backlog and get face-to-face GP appointments back as soon as possible?
Can I thank my honourable friend? I know he's a huge champion of his local NHS. I know of the incredible work that he's done on reinstatement of breast cancer screening clinics, amongst other things. Can I join with him in thanking GPs for the heroic job they've done to see us through the pandemic? While appointment numbers have returned to pre-pandemic levels, of course, patients, the public, rightly expect to see their GP face-to-face where it's necessary, and as he'll be aware, we've provided, and the Chancellor has funded, a £36 billion package to deal with the NHS backlog, as well as pursuing our plan for social care.
We now come to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member makes a very important point that I think across the House people are concerned about that. And I share the Deputy Leader's comments regarding the work of the GPs and our local primary care services. But, Mr. Speaker, can I begin by offering my commiserations to the Prime Minister after he flew away to the US and made absolutely zero progress on the trade deal that he promised us. And can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister, does the Deputy Prime Minister still believe that British workers are amongst the worst idlers in the world?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, can I just say to the Right Honourable Lady, for a start, I think it's excellent news that because of the engagement we've had with the US, they have immediately given us the boost to trade and businesses by reinstating travel from the UK to the US. When it comes to British workers, can I just say to her that we've got payroll employment back to levels we saw before the pandemic. We've got youth employment rising. We've got businesses advertising over 1 million jobs at a record high, and the fastest economic growth in the G7 this year.
Angela Rayner.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, still no trade deal. And those were the words, of the Deputy Prime Minister in his book, which he wrote alongside the Foreign Secretary, the Home Secretary and the Business Secretary. And his actions, Mr. Speaker, speak even louder than those words, because whatever they say, their political choices have made it harder for working families to get by. So can the Deputy Prime Minister tell us how much his universal credit cut and national insurance hike will take from a worker on £18,000 a year? Say a shop worker or a travel agent.
Well, what I'd say to the Right Honourable Lady is that the UC uplift was always meant to be temporary. We've paid the wages of nearly 12 million workers through this pandemic. We are coming out with rising jobs, rising wages. We would have done none of that if we'd have taken her advice, not come out of lockdown. Labour have got no plan. Our plan is working.
Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, lots of words for I don't know, so let me help him. His government chose to cut the income of a worker on £18,000 a year by over £1,100. And, Mr Speaker, that's almost exactly the same as an average annual energy bill. Just as energy prices are ballooning, they've chosen to take the money that could cover a year's worth of bills out of the pockets of working people. The Deputy Prime Minister has said the solution is for people to work harder. So can he tell us how many days a worker on the minimum wage would have to work this year in order to afford a night at a luxury hotel, say in Crete?
If she wants to talk about taxes and easing the burden on the lowest paid, I'd remind her, whenever a Labour Party has gone into government, the economy has nosedived, unemployment has soared, and taxes have gone through the roof. Under this government, we cut income tax, saving every worker £1,200 each year. We've introduced and extended the national living wage, so full-time workers £4,000 better off each year. We've doubled the free childcare for working parents, worth up to £5,000 for every child every year. When Labour takes office, unemployment goes up and the economy goes down.
Angela Rayner.
Mr Speaker, he talks about the economy. He doesn't even know how much his own holiday costs. So let me tell him, a worker on the minimum wage would need to work an extra 50 days to pay for a single night at his favourite resort. Probably, Mr Speaker, even more if the sea was open. The very same week that the government is cutting universal credit, working people face soaring energy bills. The Prime Minister has said it's just a short-term problem and we'll leave it to the market to fix. So can the Deputy Prime Minister guarantee that no one will lose their gas or energy supply or be pushed into fuel poverty this winter?
Well, the Business Secretary has made very clear that energy supplies will continue, that our #1 priority is to protect consumers. I just remind her, though, of her words. It was in The Guardian in the 11th of May, so it must be true. She said the Labour Party must stop talking down to people. Working class people don't want a handout, they want opportunities. They're getting those opportunities. Mr Speaker, they're getting those opportunities under a Conservative government, with catch-up tutoring for over 2 million children this academic year, hundreds of thousands of jobs for young people under our Kickstart scheme, and helping over 1 million people on long-term unemployment out under the Restart scheme. She's right. Labour talks down to working people. Under the Conservatives, they get to rise up and fulfil their potential.
Angela Rayner.
Well, Mr Speaker, I notice we have a shortage of hot air this week. But just as the Prime Minister isn't here, but the Deputy Prime Minister is doing his best to shore up supplies. And you know what, Mr Speaker? He talks about opportunities. The government have axed the Green Homes Grant, scrapped the zero carbon home standard, and lost the storage facility that held 3/4 of our gas. Their failures, Mr Speaker, paved the way for this crisis that will hit families and businesses. And as usual, it will be the British people that will have to pay the price. So can the Deputy Prime Minister guarantee that none of the workers employed by the energy companies will end up unemployed because of his government's failures?
Well, can I say to the right honourable lady, there's no shortage of hot air on that side of the benches. The Business Secretary's been absolutely crystal clear. We're seeing the challenge of wholesale gas prices rise all over the world. We will maintain supply this year. the Business Secretary has taken targeted action to support the 2 critical CO2 plants to make sure that not only do we see energy supplies through, but also food distribution. The reality is, for all our cheap political barbs, they have got no plan on that side of the House. If we'd have listened to the Labour Party, we wouldn't have opened up, we wouldn't be bouncing back, jobs wouldn't be rising and wages wouldn't be rising.
Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, maybe he should go back to his sun lounger and let me take over. Because the truth is, Mr. Speaker, they were warned about the problems that we faced and the energy crisis that we faced. And there we have it, absolutely nothing to help the people up and down the country who are working themselves to the ground and still struggling to make ends meet. This is a Conservative party that does not care about working people. Families, Mr. Speaker, across the country are worried about heating their homes while he's complaining about having to share his 115-room taxpayer-funded mansion with the Foreign Secretary. Just as, Mr. Speaker, just as the truth hurts, doesn't it? Just as his government are making choices that are making working families' lives harder. A typical family, Mr. Speaker, are facing a tough winter this year. Universal credit down £1,000, rent up £150, gas bills up £150, taxes up and food prices are soaring. Working people will have to choose whether to feed their kids or heat their homes. The choice for the Deputy Prime Minister is, will he make their lives easier or harder? So what will he choose, Mr. Speaker? Will the government cancel the universal credit cut?
Can I say to the right honourable lady, she should check her facts, because Chevening is funded via charity, not a penny of taxpayers' money. Let me also tell her the most disastrous thing for energy bills of hard-working people across this country would be to follow Labour's plan to nationalise the energy companies, which the CBI say would cost as much as £2,000 on bills. Mr. Speaker, this government's the one taking action to take the country forward with a plan for the NHS, a plan for COVID, and our plan is working. Employment up, job vacancies up, wages up. If we'd have listened to the party opposite, we would never have come out of lockdown. We're the ones taking the difficult decisions, getting on with the job, and our plan is working.